We'll start our practice today in Child's Pose. Child's Pose, you'll bring the big toes together and the knees wide. Your forehead can come to the mat, and if it doesn't reach comfortably all the way to the mat, you can place a forehead on a block or a folded blanket. Reach the arms out in front of you, spread your fingers wide, and feel the length of your spine. Know that this posture, Child's Pose, is always available throughout your practice or any other resting pose that you need. Make sure, above all, that you are practicing with safety in mind. Make sure you follow all healthcare practitioner guidelines. And above all, listen to your own body. Practice at the intensity level that's right for you today, and rest anytime that you need to. If I were offering hands-on adjustments today, I would say something right now like, I'll be offering hands-on adjustments today. If you would like to opt out of hands-on adjustments, please raise an arm right now so that I know to give you your space. This is your body and your practice all the time. You can start your Ujjayi breath here. This is your oceanic or victorious breath. It makes the sound like the ocean or like you're fogging up a mirror. On both the inhale and the exhale as you breathe in and out through the nose, if that's available today. You can turn your Ujjayi breath up or down as you wish. So maybe it's nice and loud, or maybe it's just barely audible. Maybe it's somewhere in between. Ujjayi breath is a warming breath that helps us build focus and heat in the practice. Drawing the senses inward, that focus on the Ujjayi breath. On your next inhale, come up to all fours to a tabletop pose, Chakravakasana. In tabletop, stack the shoulders over the wrists and the hips right over the knees, fingers spread wide. And if this is uncomfortable on your hands, I'll invite you to shift your weight forward slightly to your thumb tips or your fingertips. If that's still uncomfortable on the wrists, you can make fists and have those on the ground instead of open hands. Okay, find a long, strong tabletop, and as you exhale, cat pose, curl the spine up towards the ceiling, press through the hands. On your inhale, find cow. Drop the belly, lift your tailbone, draw your chest forward and up. On your exhale, back to cat. Draw the belly button back towards your spine. Inhale to cow. Exhale to cat. Inhale, back to cow. Exhale to cat one more time. Inhale to cow. And then come back to tabletop position. Walk the hands forward about a handprint each. Tuck your toes under, and on your exhale, lift your hips to press back to downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. In Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog, you are trying to create an inverted V shape. Your fingers spread wide, press the mat away. You have a straight line from your fingers to your tailbone, equal weight in your hands and feet. The heels press towards the earth as the hips reach up and back. And the heels don't have to touch the earth today or any day ever. They're just headed in that direction. You're always welcome to bend your knees here. That can really help find that elongation in the spine in downward facing dog. And feel into this first downward dog. Maybe walk the feet out a bit. Take any movements that you like. And then on your next inhale, look forward. On your exhale, walk your feet to your hands for ragdoll forward fold. In this ragdoll variation of forward fold, Uttanasana, the feet are separate, the knees bent, and the head hangs heavy. Relax the neck. You can sway side to side. Some people like to hook their pinkies and opposite elbows. And then draw the belly button in, release your arms. And on your heel toe your feet together. And on your inhale, slowly roll up your spine one vertebra at a time. If it is better for you to lift with a long flat back, you can do that as well. We're coming to mountain pose, Tadasana. And take a moment to find your strong mountain pose. The hands reach towards the mat. Lift through the crown of the head as you root down through your feet. So feel your feet underneath you. Your feet can be together or apart. Spread your toes. Feel equal weight in your left and right feet. Draw your ribs in, your palms reach forward, and you're long through the whole spine from the tailbone to the crown of the head. This is your foundational posture for all of your standing and lengthening postures in yoga. So take a moment to feel into this Tadasana mountain pose. It's strong, engaged, and solid. On your next inhale, extended mountain, bring the arms overhead. Urdhva Hastasana, literally translating to upward facing arms. The pinkies spiral inward and draw the shoulders down away from the ears. So you have all the elements of Tadasana here, which just with the arms overhead. On your exhale, draw the hands to heart center. And pause here in standing at attention or Samastiti. Thumbs can come to the sternum. You can close the eyes if that's comfortable or find a soft gaze. And I'll offer the opportunity here to set an intention for your practice. Maybe that is something as simple as to stay present, to listen closely, to move with intention. A samastitihi, standing at attention. Also a form of Tadasana. On your next inhale, bring the arms back overhead for standing mountain. On your exhale, hands through heart center into a forward fold, Uttanasana. This time, keep the spine long, hinge from the hips, and lead with the heart. Lengthen the spine here, shift the weight forward towards the feet. You're always welcome to keep your feet hip-width distance apart or bend at the knees. You can have your hands on the floor or a block or any other prop that you have available. On your inhale, standing halfway lift, Ardha Uttanasana. In standing halfway lift, your hands come to the shins or the thighs above or below the kneecaps. Your back is long and flat. Your shoulder blades squeeze together behind you. Draw the shoulders away from the ears. Your gaze is down, and you have those elements of your tabletop back in this posture. Inhale here, and then exhale, bring your hands down to the mat and step back to high plank position. High plank can be on the knees or the toes. The shoulders come down away from the ears. Press your upper back towards the ceiling and find a straight line from your head to your heels, or if you're on your knees, from your head to your tailbone. All right, and then on your exhale, pointing the elbows straight back behind you, lower slowly to the belly. On your inhale, we'll take Bhujangasana, cobra pose. Lift just the chest, take the weight out of the hands. Press the pelvis into the mat, draw the shoulders away from the ears. As you exhale, lower down, tuck the toes and press back to downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. All right, now from here, come on down to your knees, and I'm going to demonstrate this half series vinyasa. So this is the vinyasa that we do a ton of in our sequence. So it's important, and this is, you'll learn this as well. You do one round just like that, and then you do a demonstration for your students. So from plank position, here is plank. Can you guys see me okay? All right. Here is plank on the knees. Spreading the fingers wide, press the upper back towards the ceiling. Here is plank on the toes. From here, you can do just what we did before. Exhale, lower. Inhale, Bhujangasana, baby cobra. Exhale, downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. Nice big breath. Or you can do inhale, come forward. Exhale, Chaturanga Dandasana. Elbows come just to the rib cage and not above. You can do this with your knees as well. Inhale, upward facing dog. Lift the knees, push the mat away. And exhale, pull the hips back, downward facing dog. Now you have a third option, and that is to skip all those things all together. So we'll meet again in downward facing dog. You guys stop, I'm teaching. All right. From downward facing dog, inhale, look forward. Exhale, bring your feet to your hands, forward fold. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, forward fold. Root through your feet, inhale, stand all the way up, standing mountain, Urdhva Hastasana. And exhale, fold forward, hands through heart center, Uttanasana. Inhale, standing halfway lift. Lengthen your spine. Exhale, hands to the mat, step back to high plank position. Inhale, shift forward slightly. Exhale, lower all the way or halfway. Inhale, baby cobra or upward dog. Exhale, downward facing dog. One more time through. Sun salutation A. Inhale, look forward. Exhale, bring the feet to the hands, forward fold. Inhale, halfway lift, long spine. Exhale, fold forward. Inhale, standing mountain, bring the arms up overhead, grow tall. Exhale, hands through heart center, fold forward. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, hands to the mat, step the feet back to high plank. Inhale, shift forward, and exhale, lower all the way or halfway, elbows point straight back behind you. Inhale, baby cobra or upward dog. Exhale, downward facing dog. Good. Take 2 full breaths in your downward facing dog. And then come on down to the knees. And that's it. All right. That's your yoga practice. Sorry guys, no Shavasana. You're like, but Shavasana. Oh, I apologize for the background noise here. It's my daughter and her friend were having a very silly moment out on the porch. And they thought since they were outside, like they were all good, but there's a window right there where that was open. So I apologize. We can run through anything that you might feel that you missed or didn't get to focus on. All right. So what did you notice? What did you notice about those 2 things? Or what questions do you have? What comments? What things did you notice? Aside from the tween giggling. Yeah, Dee, did you have a?
One thing I like about sun salutation is that, like, with my low back being so tense, I like to take it slow in the beginning. So I like the half lift and back to forward fold, because I feel like it kind of just like gets you halfway there, lets you feel out where your back is, and then like have somewhere to start from and like plant a seed to get yourself all the way up to the top, because sometimes that is kind of a straining pose for me. So that's one thing I appreciate about this sequence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll talk more about that when we get to Sun A and halfway lifts and why we do those. Anybody else? Yes, Flo.
So I have a question. Yesterday I tried teaching my kids and my husband who's never done any yoga. So in like a class like that where somebody has never done stuff, do you demonstrate a lot more then? Because I found myself, okay, I better show you and I better help you out a bit more here than with my kids.
Yes, definitely. The Cambio Vinyasa sequence it's really not a beginner sequence. However, it can be adapted for beginners, and that's one of the workshops that you'll have in teacher training is considerations for beginners. But yeah, definitely when you're teaching beginners, you demonstrate more and slow it down more. Good question. Katie, you had a question or a comment.
No, it wasn't a question. It was, it's actually kind of similar to flow, but I was noticing the modifications that you were offering. So like for people's bodies, like if the hands don't work, they can use the fists, or coming down to your knees instead of the full plank. So those are kind of things that I'm trying to be aware of too, because flow, like the same thing. When I had my mom do the child's pose thing as if she were a beginner, she was like up here with her arms up in the air, and I'm like, oh right, like down to the mat or whatever, for people who've never done it. So
Right, and your mom does yoga. Yeah, when you work with me, I am really big on modifications. I think I've worked with all kinds of people. As Katie mentioned, I teach at the YMCA, and I work with all kinds of people there, from like athletes to people who are really into yoga, to people who've never done yoga before, people who haven't exercised in 20 years, you know, all kinds of stuff. So, so I tend to offer a lot of modifications when I teach to make the practice accessible. Any other questions, comments? Who can tell me where in that sequence, where was the transition from integration to Sun A? Where did integration end? What was the last pose we did in integration?
Standing mountain.
What was that? Mountain?
Right.
Which mountain? We did kind of 3 mountains. There's 3 variations of mountain there.
Just the regular.
How about this? You guys show me with your hands. Show me with your arms. Yeah, right? Good job. So samastiti or samastitihi, both are correct ways to say it. Standing at attention, right? So this is your traditional mountain pose, right? Standard mountain pose, Tadasana. This is mountain pose with arms overhead, Urdhva Hastasana. This is standing at attention, Samastiti. So essentially, your lower body is the same in all of these postures. So there's 3 poses you're gonna learn, but like, you know, you just have to remember the arm variations. All right, so this is the last thing in integration, right? And after that, you set an intention. You could Om here or something like that. You do something to kind of like draw inward again, and then you move on to Sun A. And Sun A, as Bea mentioned, it's a form of sun salutation. And yeah, we're gonna learn it all. So you guys learned child's pose. Oh yeah, Tori, did you have a question?
Sorry, you said you could Om during in Samastiti. I've been in classes where they Om to start. Is that
That's also valid? Yes.
Okay.
There are many ways to do it. For this particular, you know, in learning this, I tend to do things more at the start, but some people really like to set that intention here at Samastitihi. You know, there's lots of ways to do it. There's lots of ways to teach yoga classes. What we're doing here by having you memorize a sequence is we're giving you a template. And the advantage to it is that you learn this template really well. You can kind of put it on autopilot and then focus on other kinds of teaching skills. But as you grow in your practice, you're not just going to teach this sequence over and over again for the rest of your teaching life. You're going to start to build off of it. And you know, in 10 years, what you teach may not look anything like this sequence, and that's fine. Or it may look similar. It just depends on who you're teaching, what you're teaching, and where you choose to go with it. But there's lots of ways to do it for sure. Yeah. Right. So here I'm going to use our little rename function here. I'm going to have you rename yourself. You can keep your name there, but put a number after it. How comfortable are you on a scale of 1 to 5? How comfortable would you be teaching child's pose? 0 is like, I don't know what child's pose is. And 5 is like, I'm a professional child's pose teacher already. All right. Well, I said rename yourself, but some of you guys are putting in the chat box. So that works too. I'm just trying to gauge where you're at with it. All right, awesome. So we're feeling pretty good for the most part about child's pose. Raise your hand if you want a review on child's pose. Okay, cool. And know too that you're not gonna like memorize every single thing today or tomorrow. We're gonna give you a lot of information and you're gonna continue to work with all that information. So that'll be true throughout your training. So don't worry if you're like, wait, I didn't memorize everything today. You will, you'll get it down because you're gonna be practicing this stuff over and over and over and over and over again. So from child's pose, let's move on to cat-cow or tabletop. Let's move on to tabletop. So you can look in your manual. Does everybody have a visual manual, either digital or paper that you can look at? All right, we're gonna look at tabletop pose here. Yes, that's me. Some time ago. So, you know, tabletop is pretty simple. It has elements of mountain pose in it. Where are the elements of mountain pose?
Straight back.
A straight back, yeah, right? You have that same spinal alignment in tabletop that you do in mountain pose. Now this may kind of seem like just a pass-through posture, and it kind of is, but it's also like, it's a foundational posture. So you're really giving people a moment to, you know, lay a good foundation for their practice here by finding some solid alignment here. It's very linear, it's very grounded. And I will say too, tabletop is another safe place for people to go. So if downward dog isn't right for people for any reason, there's lots of reasons that down dog might not be accessible. Maybe it's, maybe they don't have the shoulder range of movement. Maybe they have a shoulder injury or a wrist injury. Maybe they aren't, it's not safe for them to be inverted for some reason, blood pressure, glaucoma, that kind of thing. So tabletop is always an alternative to downward dog as well. If you have a student, they can't do down dog. So yeah, your cues are all right here. As you're giving cues, choose 1 or 2 cues to use. I gave you a little bit more while we were practicing just so you could hear them. Another note about cues, there are a million cues for every pose. You are not going to know all of the cues or have to learn all of the cues. So this is a question that comes up a lot. I've heard the teacher use this as a cue. Is that an okay cue? Probably yes. That's probably just a fine cue for that teacher's class. We're giving you some cues to start with because you can get totally overwhelmed with the number of ways that there are to describe things. So these are just like, think of these as starter cues. These are good solid cues and you can learn these, and just like you'll build onto your sequence, you'll build onto your cueing as you continue in your teaching practice. Does that make sense? So these are just kind of starter cues. So don't worry about learning a bunch of different cues, or if you've heard it cued differently, that's fine. It's not necessarily wrong at all. It's just like, you got to start somewhere, right? You got to have a foundation. So your cues for tabletop: hips over knees, hands shoulder width apart. You can kind of look at that on your own body by placing your arms in front of you. A lot of people will go too narrow. Typically, it's better to go a little wider if you're going to err on one side or the other. Fingers spread wide and shoulders are over the wrists. We don't really have any adjustments for tabletop pose. And you can use fists instead of open hands. That is not my favorite thing because I think that puts a lot of pressure on the knuckle and it puts a lot of like compression on the wrist. And it doesn't really give you somewhere to go in downward facing dog. With that said, some people are more comfortable on their fists, and so that's an okay thing to offer if someone says, I really just can't do tabletop with my hands in extension like that, my wrists in extension. All right, do you guys have questions about tabletop? All right. Chakravakasana. From tabletop, so now your hands and feet are going to stay in the exact same place, and you're going to move into cat pose. What is the breath to move into cat pose?
Exhale.
Exhale. And what is the breath to move into cow?
Inhale.
And why is that? Why do we exhale to cat and inhale to cow?
You're compressing your diaphragm.
Because you're compressing the diaphragm on which one?
On the exhale.
On the exhale. Yeah, so you guys can actually try it here. So try it as, you can do it seated, it's fine. You can do these cat-cow movements seated, standing, wherever. As you exhale, pull your belly button in and make a little cat back. So that really creates space for you to curl inward, right? And now inhale to cow and really broaden your collarbones and open up. So now you're creating space to fill the lungs as you come forward, right? Now you can, if you like, you can try it the opposite way and like inhale to cat. You're like, wait, I can't do it. And then exhale to cow, right? It feels wrong, right? You're like, why does that feel wrong? It feels wrong because in yoga, typically, like 98% of the time, unless there's a really good reason for it, when we exhale, we go down, forward. And when we inhale, we come open or up, right? And so if you get that in your mind, and I think most of you have been practicing yoga for some time, and so that's probably already kind of in your like muscle memory, it'll feel wrong when you do the wrong breath. So don't get too like caught up on what's the breath, is it an inhale or an exhale? Most important thing is just that you breathe and feel it, what feels natural here. And so if you have that kind of muscle memory of like, this movement feels like an exhale and this movement feels like an inhale, right? Then it'll kind of feel natural. And just like that, it'll feel wrong when you say the wrong breath. Okay. So you exhale to cat and inhale to cow. All right, so somebody who hasn't spoken yet, tell me the cues for cat pose. All right, Kayla. I'm gonna start calling on people. That way, I just want to make sure everybody gets a chance to talk. And if you can't, if your screen is dark, or if you let me know, I won't call on you.
For cat, the cues are, you're already set up from tabletop, so then the cues are to, sorry, I'm like doing it, walking myself through it, to push away from the ground and round your spine. And just kind of let your gaze fall forward.
Yep, that works. Yep. Anybody, let's see, how about B? Do you have the manual in front of you?
I do. So Kayla, yeah, press firmly into the hands, curve your back, pull your navel towards your spine, and then drop your head.
Cool. Yep. So Kayla did a great job of paraphrasing those things. You know, notice she said the same thing, she just used a little bit different words. So again, lots of ways that you can say things. This is music, by the way. She's like, hold me, or I will climb on you. All right, let's see. Caleb, can you give me the cues for cow?
So push to the ground, inhale, open up the throat. Yeah, I don't know how to explain it. Elongate the spine upwards, heart facing forward.
Sure. So some of you guys are paraphrasing really good cues. So that's great because it shows that you understand the poses and the movements. But what we want you to do is use the cues that are in the manual. So it's okay to paraphrase them. It's okay if you don't use the exact words that are in the manual. But if you look on, you know, each page, it's got your picture, and then, you know, your cues right here. These are like your starter cues. Again, like I said, it's fine to paraphrase them. That's not wrong. But if you start with these cues, then you can kind of start to put those things on autopilot. So let's try Trinidad. Do you have the manual?
I do. You want me to
Okay.
read it?
Can you give us the cues for cow?
Okay, cow pose. Drop the belly. Lift your tailbone up. Draw your chest forward and up. And gaze up.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so why do we do cat-cow here?
To wake up the spine.
Yeah, to wake up the spine, to warm up the body, right? We're warming up here. In every exercise discipline, we do a warm-up. This is the yoga warm-up, right? We're getting ready for the practice. In yoga, we're warming up the body and we're getting centered in the mind. So what are we doing in child's pose? We're coming into the practice. Do we always have to start a yoga class in child's pose? No. But when you start the class in the same way, you kind of have this like muscle memory again, because like when your body goes into child's pose, you're like, oh, you know, your neurological system tells you it's time to do yoga, and you click into yoga mode, right? And then you draw, and you also close off your senses a little bit, because when you're looking down, you're not looking, we're very visual oriented people. So we kind of close down the senses a little bit so we can draw our attention inward to start the yoga practice. And so here in just these few postures, we've done a lot, right? We started the breath, our breath awareness. We've drawn our attention inward. We kind of set the stage for safety, for adjustments, if you're doing adjustments. And then you started to really warm up the spine. So that's like kind of your basic warm-up stuff right there. What am I missing here? All right. And then we give you some things. So you have here, some of your postures just have cues. Some of your postures have transitional cues. Transitional cues are, how do you get there, right? You want it to flow. It's called vinyasa flow, right? It's not called vinyasa, awkwardly get from one position to another, right? So we want it to flow. So that's why we have transitions, and we want the transitions to be smooth. So we've given you transitional cues. And let's see, Katie, do you want to give us the cues, the transitional cues for downward facing dog? So you are still in that tabletop position. How do we get there from downward facing dog? How do we get to down dog?
So move hands, one handprint forward, tuck toes under, and lift hips.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And what breath is that going to be?
Exhale.
Yep. Perfect. Before we go on, this is what I wanted to say. 3 things. Write this down. You know, whatever you need to do to remember this, because this is really, really important for learning the Cambio Vinyasa sequence. 3 things: breath, pose, cue, in that order. You may have already heard this, but it bears repeating if you have. Breath, pose, cue. So do it in that order. So you're gonna, you know, from tabletop, walk your hands forward, one handprint each, tuck your toes. Exhale, downward facing dog. Then you can give cues for downward facing dog. So it's in that order, breath, pose, cue, because otherwise what happens is it just turns into a mess, right? We start cueing people into a pose. People are like, I don't know, walk the hands forward, press the hips up and back, reach the heels down, and they don't really know what you're asking them to do. Most people, if they've taken like a yoga class ever, know kind of what downward facing dog is. So they'll start to make that shape with their body, and then you talk them through some cues so that they can find better alignment. So breath, pose, cue, however you want to remember it.
Can you say that again, please?
What's that?
Can you say that again? So the transitional cue you say before the breath though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Most of the time. Sometimes the transition has a breath.
Okay.
Most of the time the transition, sometimes the transition has a breath. So if it's like inhale, look forward, exhale, walk your feet to your hands. That's our next thing from downward dog. So it depends. Sometimes you're just kind of like, you're setting up. And not everything is one breath, one movement. Some of it is, and some of it isn't. Sometimes you have a couple of breaths to kind of like work on some alignment and set some things up. And Flo asked, so in a beginner's class, would it be flipped? No, I would still say breath, pose, cue. Because they can hear the name and then understand how to get into the pose. You might say the name of the pose more than once in a beginner's class. But I would still say breath, pose, cue.
I have a question.
Sure.
So when you're doing cat, cow, you come back to table, right? Before
Yes.
you move into that. Okay, cool. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I would.
Mhm.
All right. So let's see. Lori.
So I have a question on the modification for downward facing dog where it says grab sides of mats or grab sides of mat. What does that look like?
So I can show you what it looks like. Good question. This is also, honestly, it's not one of my favorite modifications, but what it's for is if you slide.
Okay.
You may have had this experience. If you have a slippery mat or you're really sweaty or you just put lotion on or whatever, and your hands are like, you're in downward dog and you can't seem to like keep your hands from sliding. So I prefer that people practice things like engagement of the hands and pressing into the fingers than to become dependent on something like grabbing the sides of the mat. But that said, if the sliding is really an interference, it would look something like this, right? And so now I'm not going to slide.
Okay.
Can you see my hands there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
So it's just an option. I think that when you grab the sides of the mat, it actually puts more pressure on the heel of the hand and the wrist, but it is something people can do because sliding can be a really big problem for some people. It can be a real barrier if they're spending a lot of time in down dog, which we do in the vinyasa sequence. Yeah. So we have cat cow, and then inhale, look forward. Exhale, bring the feet to the hands. And then you find ragdoll, forward fold. Why do we do ragdoll, forward fold? But you can guess if you want.
Is
And
it to like pull your shoulders down?
To what?
To pull your shoulders down and like open them up more because there's more weight on it if you're holding.
Yeah, it kind of gently opens up the upper back and relaxes the neck. It's almost like a restorative standing pose. We've done a lot, again, like, you know, somebody said, waking up the spine, right? We're waking up the spine. What we're really doing is we're waking up the muscles along the spine. Because we're going to use those a lot and we want them to be activated in the practice. And we also want the spine to stay long. This is a big thing in yoga, is that like we do a lot of lengthening and elongating. And that's why, you know, people who do yoga have really good posture, right? We have better posture, and we tend to have better spinal health. We can improve our spinal health through yoga. And that's mainly why, is because of so much elongating and strengthening the muscles around it. So in ragdoll forward fold, the feet are wide. This is because, you know, you don't want to fall forward here. Oh, sorry, we were still in down dog. I'm sorry, I totally jumped ahead. Can we go back to down dog? Sorry, guys. Let's go back to down dog, because down dog is one of those really foundational postures. In down dog, and you can look at the picture here. So Anna and I did this photo shoot a few years ago to show you the alignment that we teach. You'll see a lot of different alignment and different, you know, if you just Google down dog, you'll see all different kinds of things. What I'm showing here is really like a reasonably standard, like, you know, middle level down dog, right? This is, my knees are bent, and my knees still tend to be bent in downward dog. Even though I've been doing yoga for 25 years, my heels don't come to the floor. Is everybody comfortable with your heels not coming to the floor? Mm-hmm. You realize this is not something, so there's research about this. You look, you know, again, if you Google down dog, you'll see a lot of like yoga models with their heels flat on the floor, and they're in this perfect inverted V shape. That's fine. That is realistic for some bodies, but it's about 20% of people, and it has to do with ankle flexibility. It has to do with the bone structure of the ankle, not with your muscle flexibility, but with the bone structure of the ankle. So muscles we can change. Muscles we can stretch, we can strengthen, we can really work with. Muscles are very pliable. We can change muscles through exercise. We cannot change bone structure through exercise. So if you look at your ankle, and you can do this, this is ankle dorsiflexion, this is ankle flexion, right? So when your ankle is flexed, some people have a bone structure that they can flex their ankle more. And some people have a bone structure that they can flex their ankle less. About 20% of people have a bone structure that their ankle will flex in a way in which their heels can come all the way to the floor in downward dog while maintaining spinal alignment. So I'll show you guys here. So downward dog, and I'm not warm at all right now. So here's downward dog with my spine nice and long. If I insist on bringing my heels to the floor, and my calves are tight right now too, look what happens to my back. Let's see, I probably have to walk my hands back even to do it. I can't even get them to the floor right now, but you see that my back kind of curls when I do that? So it's almost like a little cat back. But if I allow myself to bend my knees just a little, then I can really find more length in my spine. Did you guys see the difference there? Was that visible?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is something you can really observe in your students. You can tell a lot about your students by looking at their downward dog. A couple of things you'll see a lot of are, one, people think they have to get their heels to the floor. They don't want to bend their knees. So bending knees can really help take that rounding out of the spine. Essentially, you want like a mountain pose back, right? Arms are about here. So this is the same as like your standing mountain, but some people don't have this shoulder mobility. So maybe their arms are like here, and that's going to change the appearance of their downward dog, right? There is not one right downward dog. You just want everybody to be in a safe downward dog. So our cues for downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana, create an inverted V shape. This is just, we're just teaching people what people need to know. What do you want me to do? You know, what shape do I want my body in? Heels pressed toward earth, fingers spread wide, And when you spread the fingers wide, that kind of takes some of the pressure out of right here, because we do a lot of stuff on our hands in the Vinyasa flow class. So we want to train people to not put all the pressure right here, because they're going to hurt their wrists over time if they do that. Straight line from fingers to tailbone. So again, we're trying to find that length, you know, and that long, straight spine. I put straight in quotation marks because the spine does have a natural curvature. So I think more like elongated, you know, stretched out. Equal weight in the hands and the feet. Some people will kind of dump all their weight into their hands. And heart presses towards the thighs. So what does heart pressing towards the thighs do for us? Yeah, Caleb?
Opens up the rib cage and the heart.
Yeah, it opens up the rib cage and the heart. It takes some of that curvature out of the back. So I'll show you again. Let's see if I can demonstrate in my box here. So here's another thing you'll see a lot of is you'll see a lot of this. So you see how my legs are straight, but my spine is really round. Sometimes it's hard for me even to do like a bad downward dog. Like it just feels wrong. But if I bend my knees a little, now I can find a lot more length in my spine and take that curvature out. Right? Some people, their shoulder range of motion is only going to allow them to go to about right here, and that's okay. They can still find that length in their spine. So they can bend their knees, and you know, this is bending the knees is listed as a modification, but it's like that's a really common modification. I frequently have like my whole class bend their knees just because I want people to be comfortable doing that, and not feel like it's something like, oh, well, if you can't do this, then you have to do something. You know, then you have to bend your knees if you're not good at it or something like that. Bending your knees is a fantastic tool to help find better alignment in downward facing dog. Okay, questions about down dog? Downward facing dog, the Sanskrita for it is adho, which means downward, mukha, which means face, and shvana means dog. That little S with the little mark over it means it's a sh sound, so it's shvana. And then asana. Have you guys learned the word asana yet? Mm-hmm. The asanas are the yoga postures. So all these postures have an asana at the end of them. So when you see these long, scary Sanskrit names, take the asana off of it, and it'll look less scary. Okay, so I'm going to have you guys do downward facing dog. So everybody find a downward facing dog position. Actually, I'm going to have you start from tabletop. I'm going to walk you into down dog so you can get this muscle memory in your body with the words. This is something you can do to practice is as you are going through the practice. So, I mean, it's fantastic if you have someone you can teach it to, and you'll be doing a lot of teaching to each other. But when you're practicing by yourself, you can do the postures and talk yourself through them. Say it out loud. It's your family and friends, your roommates and family may think you're crazy, but that's okay. You're like, look, I'm going to be a good yoga teacher, so. All right, so from your tabletop position, move your hands one handprint forward. Tuck your toes under. Exhale, downward facing dog. Lift your hips up and back. All right, so I'll have you take a moment to be in this downward dog and really feel your spine. Now from downward dog, I'm going to have you shift forward to high plank. Now, without moving your hands or your feet, pull your hips back to downward facing dog. So you're keeping your hands and your feet in the same place. Right, so that is your kind of traditional distance for downward facing dog, right? Is it okay to take a little bit shorter dog? Yes, it's okay. But most people will take a shorter downward dog because they're a little uncomfortable with the stretch of this alignment. So I'll just invite you to get comfortable with this wider downward dog if it feels a little off, as long as it feels safe. Stay in it for a couple of breaths. Now, try bending your knees a little bit. Now, with your knees bent, push your hips up and back and press the mat away with your fingertips. Do you feel your spine getting longer? You don't have to answer that. Just answer it to yourself. You feel how your spine may lengthen a little bit when you bend your knees. Now, straighten your knees again and try to maintain that length in your spine. Now just notice, and you can try this, bend and straighten your knees a couple times and notice what happens to your back as you do that. Keep pressing your hips up and back. All right. So I'm going to say your cues for you. Again, you only have to say 1 or 2. You don't have to say all of the cues when you're teaching this pose. Create an inverted V shape. Heels pressed toward earth. Fingers spread wide. Straight line from fingers to tailbone. Equal weight in hands and feet. Heart presses towards thighs. All right, cool. Come on down to your knees. Roll your wrists out a little bit. What did you observe in that downward dog? Did you observe anything new, different, the same? What did you observe when you bent your knees and straightened them again?
I feel like you can get more, you can push back farther. You can get your back straighter when you bend your knees. And once you're kind of straight and in the pose, you can straighten your legs again and you'll be in the right position.
So yeah, exactly. Because the whole back side of your body is connected, right? So all your muscles are connected. The back side of the body is called the posterior chain. All those muscles are connected and we get really tight back there. You know, we get tight from sitting, we get tight from walking, we get tight from doing other athletic activities like, you know, running or hiking. The back side of the body gets tight. And so if you can take some of the pull out of like the hamstrings and hips by bending the knees, you allow the back to open up a little bit more, right? Because otherwise you're just trying to really pull on all of it at once. So that's why bending your knees can help a lot. It can give the muscles in the back a little more space to stretch. All right. So now from down dog. So questions about down dog before we move on. The wider stance was harder. The wider stance is harder. Yeah, it's wider front to back. But that is the traditional way of teaching downward dog. Again, if it doesn't feel safe or if it hurts, you know, it's not wrong to take a shorter downward dog. But typically I teach it that way so that people can kind of get used to it. For people with weak wrists, is there a mod? That's a really good question. I teach people who haven't done a lot of vinyasa, and there's 2 things. One is in down dog, even though you kind of have more weight on your hands, there's less. So this is wrist extension, right? So this is wrist flexion, wrist extension. This is really hard when you're bearing weight. You could use blocks for the wrists as a mod. They actually even sell like these like different kinds of special wedges and egg-shaped blocks and stuff like that. And sometimes I've had students bring those to class and they're like, I just use this in my practice. So a weak wrist injuries, carpal tunnel syndrome, people have had wrist surgeries, all kinds of reasons why all of the stuff we do in our hands is hard on wrists. One of my favorite modifications, again, this is not one that you're going to offer like in a class. You're not going to be like, ooh, you could grab, I mean, you might if you're teaching at a place that has these things, but to start, but I'll show you guys these little hand weights, and I happen to have them right here. Hand weights are a nice tool if you have these available. So this is you that's needing the modification. I worked through about 6 months of a wrist injury once doing yoga, and I did vinyasa, which was a challenge. And this is one of the tools I used. Is you can have these right here, and then downward dog. And now I can hold on to these, so I'm not putting that pressure on my knuckles. And I can do plank, I can do chaturanga, I can do all kinds of stuff holding on to those weights. You want to make sure that they have space for your hands underneath them, that they have a flat side so that they don't roll. So that is an option. Like if you're working with, if you're teaching someone in your family and they need a modification, or if you're working through some wrist issues yourself, that's a tool you can use. But anyway, I digress. There's all kinds of stuff. I know it's like we can go down rabbit holes so easily in posture clinics because there's like so many things. And you're like, well, what if this person has this condition? Or what if they have, and there's all kinds of modifications and different ways to do it. Yeah, but wrist issues are a real common one. And the other thing they can do is tabletop. Right, so that if you have a big class full of people and you got somebody in there that has some wrist issues, I give them tabletop instead, because even though the wrist is in more flexion, so in down dog it might be about here, in table it's about here, but they can control better how much weight they put on it. For knee issues, should you just bend your knees more? Well, I guess it depends what kind of knee issues. You don't want to hyperextend the knees. So you don't want to bend the knees backwards at all. So downward dog typically isn't a big problem for people, with knee replacements and stuff like that. Sometimes if people have knee problems, downward dog is more comfortable than tabletop. They can also put a blanket under their knees if they're doing anything on their knees. So, and I have students who just keep a blanket like in that spot where their knees will go, and they keep it there for their whole practice. I'll kind of step around it. So, yeah. All right. So that's down dog. We spent a lot of time on it because it's an important one. And you want to have good alignment in your own practice, and you want to teach it well to people. But let's move on. And you also do, you do a fun thing called asana cleanup later on in your training, where you'll get to go through your own, you get to kind of analyze your own postures, and you'll take pictures of each other and stuff like that. And, clean up your own alignment in most of these poses. So that one's kind of fun. All right. So from down dog, here's your transitional cues. You will inhale to look forward and exhale to walk your feet to your hands. Right? Because you're inhaling to lift the gaze, and you're exhaling into a forward fold. So you're still moving into that down position. And then in ragdoll forward fold, we'll go back. Well, now we can do ragdoll forward fold, right? We're continuing to lengthen the back side of the body. The whole posterior chain, the whole back side of the body is lengthening here. Your feet are hip width distance apart here. That's so you don't fall over. Knees bend still, because we're still warming up the back side of the body gradually. You can hook pinkies and your opposite elbows. And again, you'll see people tell you all different things. Sometimes people will clasp the hands or clasp the back of the neck, whatever. Don't worry about all that stuff now, right? You'll add those things to your class over time. But right now, you can stay right here. This gives a little traction to the shoulders. The neck relaxes and you sway side to side. All right, I'm going to go over adjustments later. So So we're not gonna worry about adjustments now. We're just gonna walk through the postures. Questions about ragdoll forward fold? This is a variation of Uttanasana, forward fold. It elongates the back all the way down the back. It's an inversion, right? Downward dog, also an inversion. That means that the head is below the heart, heart is below the hips. And then I'm going to inhale to roll up the spine to mountain pose, Tadasana. Mountain pose is a very foundational posture. So it seems like you're just standing there, but there is actually a lot to it. We bring the feet together in the vinyasa practice. Some students will feel more grounded and stable with their feet separate, and that's just fine. That's why that's one of your modifications. Some practices teach it with the feet separate. You want your toes to be aimed mostly towards forward. The toes are spread. And in your transitional cues, you heel toe the feet together. Hands reach towards the mat. That just means that you unwind, you let go of this pinkies to opposite elbows. So the hands release towards the mat, heel toe the feet together, and roll your way up, and the head lifts last. For people who have spinal disc issues, this is pretty common. It may not be safe for them to roll up the spine, and then they can just lift with the flat back. Four corners of the feet press evenly. Where are the four corners of our feet? Does anybody know? Yeah, Tori?
I don't know the technical terms for it, but it's like the 2 points on the ball of your feet and the 2 points on the heel on the outside.
Yeah, I don't care about technical terms. You get that in anatomy, right? That's what we mean by the four corners of our feet. Most people tend to roll a little bit to the outer or to the inner edges of your feet. If you're not sure if you do this or not, look at the insoles of your shoes. And if it's really a lot more worn on the outer or the inner edges, that means that you're really rolling to one side or the other. Like a pair of shoes you've been wearing for a couple of years, you can take a look at that. And so that's to get that really equal standing in the feet. Engage the quads and lift the kneecaps. So this was a cue. I heard teachers say this so many times, lift your kneecaps. And I was like, how do you lift your kneecaps? And finally, I realized it is, you engage your quads. So you engage your upper front thighs, and that makes your kneecaps kind of come up. So you can try it if you want standing. Tail to the floor. That just means your tailbone is reaching down and your palms are forward. The ribs are in, the shoulders are down, and lift the crown of the head. So again, you don't have to give all these cues, but what do you notice about the order of these cues? If you look at your manual, the order that the
It goes
cues
from bottom to top.
Yes, exactly. They're from the bottom to the top. So we're building our postures from the ground up. So we start with, where do we put our feet, right? What do we do with our feet? Then we move our way up the body, right? Because if we start with arms, then, say you're like here in Warrior 2, well, then people have to arrange their feet and, it just gets confusing. So we build it from the ground up. So we're building like a firm foundation. All right, questions about Tadasana, mountain pose? All right, so the next two are kind of no-brainers from here. You're going to keep all of your same alignment. So I want you can do this seated, you can do like a seated mountain pose, but give this a try. So find mountain pose in your torso, whether you're seated or standing. If you're sitting on a couch, you may need to stand or scooch to the edge of it, right? And then from there, inhale, reach your arms up overhead. Now notice as you do that, does your chest pop forward? So if I do this without thinking about what's going on down here, look what happens, right? I almost come into like a mini back bend, right? But if I pull my ribs back in and engage my abdomen, then I have this alignment again in the spine. So this is arms overhead, standing mountain we call it. Urdhva Hastasana. Urdhva means upward, hasta means hands. So it's literally upward hands. You can spiral the pinkies inward just a little bit. Notice what happens to your shoulders. Try spiraling your pinkies out and then spiral your pinkies in, and notice how that changes the sensation in your shoulders. All right, now lift your shoulders up to your ears and then draw them back down. And notice how that changes the sensation. So Urdhva Hastasana, arms overhead, pinkies spiral in, shoulders down away from the ears. And that's it. On your exhale, draw your hands to heart center for standing at attention, Samastitihi. And this is where, again, we have this mudra here. This is called the Anjali Mudra. Anjali means offering. So it's like you're offering your practice to yourself or to the higher good or whatever you want to offer your practice to, and that's why we set our intention here. Thumbs to the sternum. It says eyes closed. I don't tell people that they have to close their eyes, but I tell people that they can close their eyes. Various reasons. Some people aren't comfortable closing their eyes, but I do offer that option. And close your eyes if you want. All right. And that concludes integration. All right. So you all have in your manual questions about integration at all? Okay, so you have in your manual at the very beginning of the postures, you have something called posture list with breath cues and transitions. So I want you to find that list. And I don't care if it's digital or otherwise. This is Isabella. She's a baby. They both like to be held. And you can use this posture list with breath cues and transitions. Notice that they all have an inhale or an exhale, right? Because this is important, because why? Breath, pose, cue. So I'm gonna put you guys into pairs. Is everybody good with going into pairs right now and working for about 20 minutes? Okay, so we're gonna use breakout rooms. Have you all used breakout rooms before? Okay, so basically you're going to magically teleport into a room with a randomly assigned partner, and I'm going to have you teach integration to your partner, right? Breath, pose, cue. And I will have you pick 1 or 2 cues, tops. So don't worry about giving all the cues, because that will trip you up. 1 or 2 cues. Use your transitional cues. So remember, you're getting people into the posture. I will pop in and out of the breakout rooms, and you are welcome to ignore me if you're in your flow, or pause and ask me a question if you're like, oh, I need some support here, okay? So teach integration to your partner. Your partner will then give you one thing that you did fantastic and one thing that you can work on. So that might be just the smoothness of the transitions or the smoothness of your speech. It might be learning the cues better. It might be all kinds of things. So one, we call it a wish and a smile, right? A smile and a wish, right? So give them one smile, one thing that they did great, and one wish, something for them to work on. And then switch, have your partner teach you integration. It is helpful for your partner if they can see you practicing in your frame. If you're not able to do that, you're just gonna have to work it out with them. But know that if that's a possible thing for you, that can be helpful to your partner. Okay, questions before we break out into rooms? All right, here we go. After this, we'll take a little break and move on to Sunny. So 20 minutes, I'll send you a message when it's time to come back.
Diane, we dropped back into the group. Good job.
You got magically teleported. Breakout rooms are kind of fun like that. It is like you go into another room. It's cool. Yeah, if we were practicing in person, we'd like put you in kind of like, you'd be like in a different corner of the community area or the studio. And, but yeah, here, so this is just how we do it online. It's cool stuff. Kayla and Max, you guys, Zoom put you guys in a room together.
I was wondering, so we separated and went into different rooms, and then the breakout room started, and we just saw each other, and we were like, oh, well. I was like, I guess you can come back downstairs now.
Oh, yeah, the breakout rooms you can like randomly assign.
Randomize. That's funny.
You can manually assign them and you can randomly assign them, but since there was an even number, I randomly assigned them, and Zoom put you guys together. I thought that was funny. All right, so how did that go?
We need to practice more.
Practice more.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What came up for you guys as you were practicing? What were some of your strengths and weaknesses?
This is hard.
Yeah.
Hard.
It was like difficult to keep things going, flowing, as well as the reminders of telling you to breathe with your movements. Like I had a lot of trouble. I was like, oh yeah, breathe, of course. Like you should be exhaling here. And it's kind of funny too, because Kayla and I are very familiar with each other, so it should be more comfortable. And it was, it's not like it wasn't. But it's just all the cues, all the steps, breathe, cue, step, you know. It's just a repetition thing. And then sometimes I feel like I'm saying too much. Sometimes I feel like I'm not saying enough. Mm. So it's a whole lot. It's a whole lot that I need to fix.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot. So,
yeah.
That's why I say pick a cue or two, because you don't have to say all of the things. You can't say all of the things. There's too many things to say. And some people, some of us, our tendency is to say too much. Some of us, our tendency is to say too little. Most of us tend towards saying too much. So don't worry. You know, it is also okay. So here's my 2 tips for you. Number 1 is make sure you are breathing, right? So you're telling your students when to breathe and reminding them to breathe. Make sure that you're also breathing. You can use Ujjayi breath while you're teaching. You can use a nice quiet Ujjayi breath, and that can help you remember to breathe, and it can also kind of keep you grounded and centered. So make sure that you remember to breathe. And then make sure that, what was I going to say? Oh, it's okay to be quiet. It's okay to leave a little quiet space, you know? So when they get into that first, you know, when they're not doing a 1 breath per movement, like they can be in down dog and you can take a couple breaths while they're in down dog. And those 2 breaths might feel like a really long time when you're teaching, you know, of silence. It's like dead air on the radio or something like that. You know, and on the radio, I used to be in radio, and I would say, oh, you don't ever want to have dead air, but in yoga you can, because that inner silence is really what we're looking for. So it's okay to have a little quietness. You don't have to speak the whole time. So somebody asked how do you pick and choose what cues to use? For now, just pick a cue. Don't worry about which one. Yeah, for now, just pick a cue. And that's one of those things that will come with time. Because as you're teaching, like then when you're working with an individual student, say you're teaching your friend or your roommate or your family member in person, as you observe them, you'll see which cues they need. So the cues, you'll choose the cues that your students need. And as you practice, that will start to come more naturally. Yeah, but for now, as you're just practice teaching with each other and you guys all know all of the cues, just pick one or 2, and don't worry too much about it. What else came up in other groups? What did anybody find anything you noticed you were like, oh, I'm really that let's say your partner, what was your partner good at? What was someone share the strength of their partner? Yeah, Katie or Jenny?
Kayla was really good at offering some modifications and then the transitional cues. I found that in like our first go through, I forgot those. So I'd just be like, oh, get into this pose and how do you get there? So after I listened to him, my second time around was a lot better.
Cool.
Good.
And Katie?
And then Diana flowed really well, and then also was adding on more of those spiritual or mental reminders to connect to your mat. And then I forgot exactly what you said with the Samastiti, but it was something about like love or like heart. So I liked the spiritual pieces that she put in there too, and not just like spitting out the cues and the postures.
Awesome. So that's my one other bit of advice is really try to stay focused on those strengths. And when your partners give you that positive feedback, take it to heart. So my daughter and we did a program called Kid Power, and it's really a safety program for kids. But in Kid Power, they have this thing called they have like two things you can do. So if somebody gives you a put down, you have like a little mental trash can, right? They actually do like a physical, like you make a little trash can. So if somebody gives you a put down, like they say something mean that doesn't serve you, like you're really stupid, right? You take that and you put it in your trash can, right?
That's good.
But if someone gives you a compliment and they tell you something kind, a lot of times what we do, and we start learning this as children, is we put that in the trash can too, right? Well, that doesn't belong in the trash can. That one you take and you put it in your heart. So take that positive feedback and put it in your heart, and don't worry that you're going to get a big head, right? You're probably not, unless you know that you have those tendencies. It's most likely, most of us tend to not put enough of that positive feedback in our heart. So don't throw the positive feedback in your trash can. Somebody says something mean, yeah, put it in your trash can. And then, the critical feedback, take that and work with it, but don't hold on to it. Don't put it in your heart. Just kind of hold it out here and be like, okay, let's work on that. All right. So we want to work on the things we need to work on, but also know this is like day 2 for you guys, right? So give yourself a little grace. You're doing fantastic. As I was popping in and out of rooms, I don't think I quite got to hear everybody teach, but what I did hear was really clear, direct cues, a lot of real intentional speech, people understanding. I heard a lot of really good breath, pose, cue, and I saw a lot of authenticity. I heard a lot of really authentic voices. I didn't hear anybody who sounded robotic or inauthentic in any way. So I heard everybody's personalities coming through in their voice, which is really one of the most important things that you're going to learn. And I heard really good feedback being given, really helpful feedback of things to work on, and really real and true feedback about strengths. So awesome job. So I want you to now, let's do it in the chat box because I think that'll be easier. But on a scale of, actually, let's do it with fingers. Let's do fist to 5, fist to 0. Integration. How do you feel about this series of integration? 5 is, I am ready to teach integration in a lifetime class. Fist is, what's integration? Right? Anywhere in between. So show me with your fingers, how are you feeling right now about integration? Teaching integration. It can be any number of fingers. No right or wrong answer. Okay. And some 2s and some 3s. All right. Fantastic. So that's normal. That's really probably exactly where you should be. Let's take a little break. And when we come back, we'll start on Sun A. And then hopefully we're going to have time to put them both together in practice today, but we'll see. Fingers crossed we'll have time for that. But I at least want to get through the posture clinic so that you can start on Sun B on next Saturday. And you'll be able to practice Sun A integration and Sun A through the week. All right. So it is now 11:20. I'm going to give you guys till 11. Can we do till 11:40? Does that sound good? 20-minute break? Okay, let's take 20 minutes, come back at 11:40. So during your break, I will invite you to get off of the screen. So step outside, get some fresh air, get a snack, go to the bathroom, stretch, move your body, whatever you need. But I will, if it's possible, like if you need to text your grandma or whatever, please do what you need to do. But as much as possible, stay off of the screen for just a little bit. And I'll see you in 20 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, so Sun A. We call it Sun A. It's really a form of sun salutation. Sun salutations are part of most historical yoga practices, and there's lots of different forms of them. So there are different ways to do a sun salutation. This is one of them. It's derived from the Ashtanga practice, which we'll talk about tomorrow in the history of yoga. Why do we do sun salutations? What does sun salutations do? Or why is it here in the sequence? Anybody? What's the purpose of a sun salutation? There's more than one answer.
Or why we do sun salutations?
Mm-hmm.
Is it like for warming up? I feel like it's a good warm up.
Yeah, right. So we did kind of integration is sort of our like coming into the practice, gentle warm up stuff, right? Now we're really preparing for a more vigorous flow. So we're starting to bring the energy up in the practice with a sun salutation.
I think, can you hear me?
Yep.
So whatever I practice, I didn't do a lot of vinyasa, much like now I'm doing more, so it's kind of fun. But whenever I practice anything with sun salutation, it made me think about being grateful, kind of like always make me feel like saluting the sun, the energy, and opening up and bringing that energy for my practice.
Yes, yes, absolutely, very good. Traditionally, sun salutations were done in the morning too, as you said, to salute the sun. So it is kind of like a way of starting, you know, traditionally starting the day. For us, we're starting the practice with that sense of like, you know, offering the practice with some gratitude, with some reverence.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so in the sun salutation, we have movements that are like, you know, opening and greeting, and then we bow. So you're bowing forward in the sun salutation. So they are also warming, they're strengthening, really warming up the core and the shoulders here. Going up and down, you know, getting the blood circulating. And the respiratory system really alive and awake. Maybe even moving into some cardiovascular exercise as we move through this. Okay. Sun A in the Cambio Vinyasa sequence. How many times do we do it? How many times do we do the Sun A? Show me with fingers, yeah. 3, exactly. 3 times. Remember this one, 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
1 time, you talk your students through it. Then you stop, you demonstrate, and then they go through it 2 more times. This is important because we do a lot of these in a yoga class. Sometimes you may teach a class where you don't stop and demonstrate every time. If you have an experienced class, you may not do like make everybody come down to their knees and watch while you demonstrate. But to start, again, this is part of the template. So start by doing it. Get yourself in the habit of demonstrating, because demonstrating is a skill as well. So you'll talk your students through it the first round, pause and demonstrate, then talk them through 2 more rounds. As you demonstrate, you'll notice when I demonstrated, and this is, it's almost easier to remember on when you're doing it on Zoom. You know, you'll see I have my mat set up behind me this way. Demonstrate from the side so that they can, and make sure that they can see you. So if you're teaching online, make sure your students can see your demonstration. They can see your hands and they can see your feet. So if you're teaching online, set your camera up so that your body can be in the frame for your demonstration. If you are teaching in person, still demonstrate from the side so that your students can see your alignment. A couple things about demonstration. Do you have to, what if you can't do the poses? This is a question that comes up. What if you can't do chaturanga? What if you have a shoulder injury and chaturanga is not a safe thing in your body? What do you do? Katie?
You could have someone in class maybe volunteer to demonstrate as you talk it through if they're feeling comfortable.
You could absolutely ask a student to demonstrate for you. If you do that, ask your student before class. Don't just call them out in the middle of class. So before class, be like, hey, would you mind demonstrating this for me? You know, and pick somebody that you know has a good form in the flow so that they're demonstrating. Good form for your students. This is where we really start to see a lot of breakdown in alignment. So we're really trying to teach people to do it well. The other thing is you are allowed to demonstrate the modification. In fact, you're encouraged to demonstrate the modification. I often demonstrate from my knees, even though I can do it from my toes, because when you demonstrate the modification, even if you can do it without modifying, you give your students permission. You know, oh, the teacher's doing the modification, so it must be cool to do the modification. So you're sending that message to your students. All right. So we paused in Samastitihi, the end of integration. And now we're moving on to inhale, bring the arms overhead. Exhale, fold forward. And that's our next pose. Forward fold, Uttanasana. This is very, very similar to Ragdoll. It's another version of Uttanasana. That word Uttana indicates the stretching out of the back and the back side of the body. Your transitional cues are to hinge from the hips. What does it mean to hinge from the hips?
Straight back when you're going down, so it's not as much pressure as like rolling down.
It's what? Sorry, I couldn't hear.
Sorry, I was not unmuted. Like keeping a straight back when you're going down, so it's not as
Yeah,
much pressure as when
right?
you're
So you, exactly, so you're not hinging from your spine. So if I can show you here, if you guys can see, hinging from the hips. So for me, hinging, so if you can even try this on yourself, put your hands in your hip creases, right? This is like hinging from the hips, right? And you can, you know, if you put your hands in your hip creases, you're gonna kind of fold into your hands as you come forward. But if I hinge from my spine, well, now it's something more like this, right? And this is fine in Ragdoll. But for this particular forward fold, now we're moving into a deeper stretch, right? And we want to find more engagement and more alignment here. Now, you'll notice that Anna's back is rounded a little bit in the picture. This is Anna now. And she's got a little bend in her knees, right? Now, I know that Anna's a runner, so she probably has tight leg muscles, right? So she's going to bend her knees a little bit so that she can get a little more length in her spine as she folds forward. Hinge from the hips, lead with the heart. Lead with the heart is just another way of saying that you don't lead with your shoulders, right? You're gonna lead with your heart. So you go forward like that. And that's how you get there. What breath do you use as you go down into a forward fold?
Exhale.
Exhale, right, because you're going down and inward. All right. In your forward fold, the weight comes forward in the feet. That doesn't mean that you put your weight in your toes. It means you put the weight in your balls of your feet, because the tendency is to put all the weight back in your heels. Lengthen the spine. Relax the neck. And people can keep their feet hip width distance. If they've kept their feet hip width distance in mountain pose, they're just going to stay there for forward fold. Bending the knees is, again, fantastic for most people. I often encourage a micro bend, because another thing you'll see commonly is hypermobility or hyperflexibility in people. So I can show you on myself. I'm not hyperflexible in all my joints, but I am in some of them. My elbow. See what my elbow can do? This is pretty common, especially in women. Sometimes men too can do this with their elbow. This is safe for me right now because I am not weight bearing, right? But if I put pressure on this, I'm going to put a lot of pressure on this joint in a way that's just not healthy for it. So I have to focus on keeping a little micro bend in my elbow to keep my elbows healthy, right? Same thing happens in my knees. So I can bend my knees backwards really easily. And so I have to really engage, and that shifting the weight forward to the balls of my feet helps with that as well. It makes me engage my legs. So if you are a hyper flexible person, and you probably know who you are, right? If your knees bend backwards, if your elbows bend backwards, if your hips rotate externally a lot, like if you can sit really comfortably in like full lotus pose with your legs wrapped up, you know, or if you can just go right into the splits with no problem, there's a good chance that you have some hypermobility, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not as good of a thing as we tend to treat it in yoga. We tend to kind of, what's the word? We tend to kind of fetishize it, or like make it, you know, like, oh, you should be this way, or this is, you have such a great practice if you can do all these crazy flexy bendy things. But really, a strong practice or an advanced practice is an aware practice, not meaning, you know, it's not that you can get your foot behind your head or something like that. So the advanced practice is the one that is very aware of what is most beneficial for the body in all of the moments of practice and all the seasons of practice throughout your life. So the goal is not to be as bendy as possible, but to be as safe as possible, as aware and informed as possible. So all that to say, feel free to bend your knees, right? It is not cheating. It's not cheating to bend your knees. All right. You can also have your hands on blocks. So because a lot of people feel like in a forward fold, they got to touch the floor, and some people aren't going to touch the floor. So it's a bit of a challenge right now because of COVID. A lot of facilities aren't using props, even in person. But you can use, you know, a block here can be a great tool, right? This is like, if this is as far down as I can go, and you can see here, I can bend my knees backwards. I'm going to keep a little micro bend in my knees to make sure I don't do that. I could also rest my hands on my legs, right? Or if I can reach the floor, that's fine, but there's no prize for getting your fingertips to the floor. All right. Questions about forward fold? All right. What are we strengthening in forward fold?
The back?
Well, maybe a little, but more so, we're more stretching the back. Now, if we're keeping the back long, yeah, we're going to engage some of the torso muscles. The back of the legs, yeah. And even more so the front of the legs, right? So as you shift your weight forward, and you can try it too, you know, and stand up and just try shifting your weight forward a little bit and just feel what actually engages when you're in your good forward fold alignment and you shift your weight forward a little bit. Notice what kind of fires up in your body. When you shift the weight forward a little bit, that makes you engage your legs. It makes you engage your core. It's not a lot. It's not like you're lifting weights, but it's subtle. Okay, so from forward fold and similar. So your legs are gonna stay right where they are, and you're gonna inhale to standing halfway lift, or some of you just call it halfway lift. Ardha means half, so it's Ardha Uttanasana. You can see the picture of Anna here. She has a pretty flat back in her halfway lift. And the other thing, you'll see this a lot in halfway lift. Let's see if I can. Here, you'll see a lot of this, right, in halfway lift. Some people have kyphosis in their shoulders and they actually can't draw their shoulders together. But a lot of people, it's just an awareness thing. So that's why we say, draw your shoulders away from your ears, squeeze your shoulder blades together. I always think of tabletop right here. Same alignment in your back. And again, if you shift your weight forward slightly, that turns everything on in the front side of the body. A little bit of glutes too. Much like in standing forward fold or in downward dog, if people have a lot of curvature in the spine, bending the knees can really help them find that length. Why do we do halfway lifts? To lengthen the spine, yes, that is true. That's one
like it
reason.
straightens, I mean, I'm sorry. It makes the back of your spine stronger. Like I can feel it. I can feel the work.
Yeah.
Holding it.
Yep. It lengthens your spine, which we're doing that throughout the practice. Avoid blood to head coming too quickly out of inversions. Yes. So I have low blood pressure. Especially if I've been in a forward fold for like a few breaths, if I pop right up into mountain pose, I'm gonna get real like dizzy. Like I might even need to sit down. So it avoids that. So it gives you a little bit of like, you know, a little bit of ease coming back up without interrupting the flow. So it does those two things really. Yeah, it's like a leveler, right? So it's like, it lengthens the spine and it helps encourage that continual long spinal alignment. Instead of holding the shoulders forward and back, you want to roll them back and down. And it helps people come up without, you know, having all the blood rush to their head. Is it okay if you add an extra halfway lift? Thumbs up or down? Yes, right? So a lot of people, I see people get tripped up on halfway lifts a lot. And they're like, wait, did I already do halfway lift? Doesn't matter, carry on. An extra halfway lift doesn't, just act like you did it on purpose, right? Because it's not a one-sided pose, right? If you do an extra warrior 2 on the right side, but not on the left side, that's a little bit bigger deal because now you've missed a side, and your practice is a little uneven. It's not the end of the world either, but if you add an extra halfway lift, it's like really not even a thing. So as you're teaching, as your practice teaching, if you miss a halfway lift, especially if you miss it on the way down, not a big deal. So don't stress about the halfway lifts. They're there as kind of a spinal reset, lengthening, you know, easing the transition back to standing. But it's not the end of the world if you miss one or you add one. Okay. All right, then from standing halfway lift, you'll exhale to forward fold and inhale to stand back up to standing mountain. And then exhale, hands through heart center. Inhale, halfway lift. And then on your exhale, your hands come to the mat and you step back to high plank position. And this is where it can get a little tricky. And this is where that teaching the alignment is super important. Plant hands shoulder width distance. Again, same as tabletop. And you can set up your alignment, you know, even just standing. You can find plank position at a wall and practice that alignment. Your arms are out in front of you, right? And then, and everybody can try this even seated, if you can just find a tall spine. Spread your fingers and then push into your hands so that your upper back presses back behind you. You can do it in plank if you want to feel it with weight bearing. You can do it at a wall, or you can just do it like this. So push your upper back so you can see, so my back could be here, right? Or I could push it up. Right now, some people can overdo this, but we'll see if you can see this on camera. There's something called scapular winging. So your scapula, your little wings back here, your bones. And when we look at a person's chaturanga, you don't want them to be, you can see this is now my scapula are winging a lot. But if I push into my hands, and it's like I'm lifting the back of my heart towards the ceiling, that takes that winging out of it. Right now, if you look at my hips, this is something you'll see. A lot of this kind of thing. This is not plank, right? A plank isn't in this shape. Neither is a plank in this shape. The plank is a long, strong line, like a board, and that's why we call it plank. Here it is on the knees. Again, I can do scapular winging here, and I can push into my hands to take some of that out. I'm going to tone up the abdomen. This is a core exercise. In a straight line from the head to the heels. So that's how we're trying to say it's a plank, right? It's not a banana. It's not a mountain. It's a long, strong line. And a lot of people, for some reason, are very, very resistant to doing this from their knees. Even my students who will take modifications in many other positions are very resistant to doing plank and chaturanga from their knees. I don't know why that is, but I often demonstrate it from the knees just because I really want to create that culture of like, it's fine. It's better to do this. It is much, much better to do this series with good form and modifications or not as many than to do it, you know, than to do lots of them. The reason for this is because we do so many of them. This is a repetitive movement, and people who practice vinyasa often can get repetitive movement injuries from doing this movement from plank to chaturanga to up dog with poor form. So it's really important to practice with good form and to teach your students with good form. There are some people who are just not going to listen to you. That is not your problem. Your problem is that you're teaching it well and that you are conveying the correct information and giving them the information that they need to make an informed choice about how they practice. All right, questions about plank? All right, so from plank. So now, in our first round, we lower all the way to the floor. And then we go into cobra pose. Now, you may have practiced cobra as one where you lift and put pressure into your hands. That's like a traditional cobra. We do kind of a baby cobra. Bhujangasana is what it's called. This is a common mispronunciation as well. There is no ja sound in Sanskrit, so it's not Bhujangasana. It's Bhujangasana. It's a hard J. All right, so Bhujangasana. What are we doing in Bhujangasana? What are we strengthening?
Upper back?
Is it low back?
We're strengthening the whole back. Yeah, the back side of the body. Now, I guess I should back up and say, what are we strengthening in plank? Core. Upper body. And you don't have to know the anatomical terms either. That's fine. You'll learn that stuff. But think about like what parts of the body, what areas of the body. So, core, chest. Yeah, it's like a push-up. It's push-up position, arms, legs, everything, right? Everything. We're strengthening everything in plank, right? Transverse abdominals, you'll learn what those are if you don't already. So lots of strength in plank. And then you'll lower to the belly. And then in cobra, again, you're strengthening the back. What are you opening in cobra? What are you stretching? Yeah, I see Caleb doing this, right? You're opening the chest to the collarbones, right? This is really an important movement because we spend so much of our life like this, right? If you work at a computer, if you look at a phone, you know, even if you care for small children or you chop vegetables or whatever we do, most of what we do is this way. So this movement is really, really important for our posture, for our breathing, even for our mood, for emotional health. So we do a lot of this. So in this back bend or heart opener, we're strengthening the back side of the body and stretching the front side of the body. That's kind of the short answer, right? In a forward fold, we are strengthening the front side of the body or at least compressing the front side of the body and stretching the back side of the body. In heart opening position, we are opening the front side of the body. And if it's active, we're strengthening the back side. Okay. Squeeze elbows and ribs to the ribs and lower to the ground. What does that help us do? That's our transitional cue. So everybody do this. So you're in plank. Do your sitting plank, sitting or standing plank, or you can do it on the floor if you like. And then lower down and keep your elbows pointed right back behind you all the way to the floor, right? So now you're set up for cobra, right? And what did you not do when you weren't weight bearing? You didn't do this, right? This is what a lot of people, you'll see this, people will do this as they come down. This is not particularly great for your shoulders, especially not doing many of them over and over again. So we really teach, and this is it's hard because we haven't strengthened triceps is what we're strengthening as we come down. We'll talk about chaturanga here in a moment. So this is why I really encourage people to do it from their knees. You're not bearing as much weight when you're on your knees, and it makes this movement easier. So that's the transition, tops of the feet to the mat. So you're gonna untuck your toes here. Zip your legs up. Press the tops of the feet into the mat. Press the pelvis into the mat. Lift the chest. Take the weight out of your hands. Shoulders away from the ears. Shoulder blades squeeze together. Again, you're not gonna say all of those cues. You might say something like this. Tap them into plank. On your exhale, lower to the belly. Point the elbows back behind you. Zip your feet up. Inhale, lift your chest. No weight in the hands. Okay. And then you exhale, back to downward facing dog. And that is your round one. Then you're gonna pause and you're gonna do a demonstration. Do you guys want me to walk you through the demonstration again? Thumbs up if that would be helpful. You know, my kid was being really loud during that time and her friend. They got these helium balloons and they were like doing the thing where they like sucked in the helium and then they were talking and they just thought that was the most hilarious thing ever. I was like, you guys stop it. I know it's funny. All right. Okay, so let's say we've gone through our first round. All right, and then I'm gonna say, come on down to your knees for a moment. I'm gonna demonstrate our half series. Sometimes we call this the half series. Sometimes we just call it a vinyasa. It's really a half sun salutation. So I'm going to demonstrate our half series for us so that we can learn to do it with good alignment. So from your high plank position, and you're welcome to do this from the knees, which looks just like this. Find plank position, press your upper back up towards the ceiling. And then on your exhale, tucking the elbows in towards your sides, lower to the belly. Inhale to baby cobra, just like we did before. And exhale, pull the hips back to downward facing dog. That's option one. Option two is from your high plank, you can find Chaturanga Dandasana. Now your elbows are gonna stay hugged in towards your rib cage, and they don't go more than 90 degrees. So I'm gonna show you from the knees first. Exhale, elbows to the rib cage. Here it is on the toes. Inhale, upward facing dog. Flip the tops of the feet down, lift the chest. Press the mat away with the hands, lift the knees. Broaden your chest. And then from there, exhale, downward facing dog. And you have a third option, which is to skip it all together and press your way back to downward facing dog. So if your shoulders get tired, if your wrists get tired, feel free to skip these at any time and just come right back to down dog. That'll be our meeting place. Okay, so that's your demo. And that's gonna be one of the things that you'll practice, is giving your demo, right? And you'll find your own way to do it. And it may feel a little awkward at first, but you will develop your style of demonstrating that so we can teach with proper alignment. Questions about the demo? Yes, Tori.
What's the best way for us to self-check ourselves to make sure we actually have proper alignment when we're doing demos?
Yeah, good question. Your phone's got a video camera on it, yeah?
Okay.
Yeah, I would take a little video of yourself and look at it. If you're working, when you're working in partners too, you can ask your partner, you know, and let your partner know. If you see someone you're working with, you know, we're here to just support each other and give each other feedback. So this is like your safe place to make mistakes. So, you know, if you're like, hey, I noticed that your scapular really winging a lot as you lower into Chaturanga, or I noticed that your elbows are really popping out to the sides, or your back is going into a back bend as you lower. You'll see a lot of that. A lot of people tend to like flow through this and do this little swoopy thing. From the Ashtanga practice, they used to teach it. So let's talk for a minute about Chaturanga. So in Chaturanga, so again, you can do this. You can come back to your plank here, your seated plank. And then as you exhale, pull your elbows back and then pause right when your elbow meets your rib cage. So now your upper arm is sort of like perpendicular to the floor. If you were in Chaturanga, your upper arm would be parallel to the floor. This is the alignment you want. This is not the alignment you want. You will see people do this. This is partly because of just bad habits, because they kind of want to do the swoopy thing up through it. The reason we don't want to do that is it puts a lot of stress on the shoulder joint, right? The short answer is, and I'm sure Anna will give you a much more anatomical reason for this, but you can hurt your shoulder over time. You can hurt your wrists over time doing that. So that's why we don't teach it. Yes, traditional Ashtanga teaches that variation. I've seen so many swoops. Oh my gosh. So we're trying to talk people away from the swoop, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? The swoop. So we really want it to be each movement. It's not like one swoopy thing that you just go through. It's like each thing is its own pose, and each pose has its own integrity. And so you have plank, Chaturanga, upward dog, you know, like it's each its own thing. So you really want to treat them each as individual poses. So your Chaturanga alignment is here, right? It's not here either with my shoulders up by my ears. So it's right here. So I'm going to have everybody try it because Chaturanga, Chatur is 4, Anga is limb. and it is Chaturanga Dandasana. Danda is a staff, so it is literally four-limbed staff pose. So you're long and straight like a staff, not like a banana or a mountain, right? It's a long thing, like in, you know, mountain pose, your spine is long. In Chaturanga Dandasana, your spine is long like it is in mountain pose. So I encourage you to try it if you're in a place where you can do that. And I'll encourage you to start by trying it from your knees, just to see what that feels like. Even if you have like the world's best Chaturanga, give it a try from your knees, because that'll help you explain this to your students. Let's fingers spread wide right underneath the shoulders. And find the long line from the tailbone to the crown of the head. And you'll still feel like weight in your arms, like you are weight bearing, right? You're holding the weight of your upper body. And now from your knees, try this just a couple times. Drop your chest down, but keep your spine long, and feel your scapula wing for just a sec. And then push your heart back up. So you feel that change. Your arms stay straight. It's not a push-up. It is actually, it's called a serratus push-up. And then you're pressing your upper back upward. Now, I kind of have to walk my knees forward a little bit to do this. Lower to Chaturanga, if that's safe in your body. And notice what happens here, because you can usually hold it just a little bit longer from the knees. Does your spine sag down, right? Your arms shake a little bit, that's okay. And then you can kind of swoop your chest up and lift your knees into up dog. So that is a much safer version of the vinyasa sequence of this half series sequence for a lot of people. Now, if you want to try it from your toes, you can try it from your toes as well. I'm sure you all have done it lots of times. But as you pull the arm in, notice that the elbow just comes here. It doesn't come way back here. That may be a safe way to do it for some people. If they have a long-term practice, a lot of strength in the shoulder joint. When you're teaching a class to the general public, you really don't want to teach it that way. Because again, over time, that can cause shoulder injury, can also cause wrist injury. Yeah, and if people are going into a back bend as they lower, that can cause back injury. So it's not like something massive is going to happen in your class just in the moment, right? It's more like an over time, repetitive movement injury, because we do these over and over and over again. So, questions about Chaturanga Dandasana? All right, awesome. And you can see in the picture here of Anna, she's up on her toes. You can reach back through your heels here, straight line from heels to head as you lower down, and that means no swoop, right? So if you're going into a back bend as you lower, that's a good indication, or if your student is going into a back bend as they lower, that's a good indication to try it from the knees. All right, questions about Chaturanga Dandasana? We got one more pose, guys, and then we're gonna practice.
That's all supposed to be done in one breath, right?
What's that?
That's all supposed to be done in one breath?
Yes, good question. Okay, so the first time you teach it, you're probably gonna have them hold plank and like teach the alignment. Then you're gonna do the demonstration. And from there, this is all one movement. Inhale, exhale, inhale, halfway lift. It's one breath per movement. And then this is the part, all one movement. Exhale, hands to the mat, step back, high to low plank, inhale, upward dog. So there's kind of like 3 movements that happen on that exhale. Does that make sense? So it's exhale, or inhale, halfway lift. So then there's sort of 3 movements. Exhale, hands to the mat, step the feet back, lower to plank, Chaturanga, and inhale to up dog. So those are kind of 3 movements on one breath. It is okay to take breaths in between. But the traditional way we teach it is that that is all one long breath. Especially if you're teaching beginners, you're not going to teach them to do that all on one breath. But for our purposes, yes, that is one long breath. Good question. All right, are we ready for, oh, yes. B?
I had a question a little bit earlier. When you're lowering, if you like turn your wrists out a little bit, would that help you keep your elbows in, or would that put strain on your shoulders when you're dropping down more?
Well, I think different bodies are made differently, right? Some practices teach to widen your arms a little bit and turn your fingertips out. We teach a more traditional alignment, but I think it's really a personal thing. Like if that feels right in your body and there's no pain and there's no pressure in the shoulder joint, you know, maybe here with the hands in this alignment, there's pain and there's pressure in the shoulder joint, but a little bit of this takes that all away. Maybe that's okay. If everything else is in good alignment, the core is strong, then I think that would be okay. You know, your practice
I
is
just have like really long arms and wide shoulders, so.
Right. So traditionally you would want your hands to be shoulder distance apart. So if you have wider shoulders, your hands might naturally be a little wider. So you might just check in with that. Again, that's something where a camera or a video can help, and you can try it from some different angles and see, you know, or if you're working one-on-one with a partner, have them kind of look, especially if it's in person, it's easier to see that alignment.
Cool, thanks.
All right, upward facing dog. So upward facing dog is our alternative to cobra. What are we strengthening in upward dog? I'll give you a hint, similar to baby cobra. What's strengthening?
Strengthening our back and stretching the front of our body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're also getting some arm and back strength because you're pressing into your hands and you're lifting your knees. Right, you're gonna see probably a lot of this. A lot of this kind of thing, right? This is not necessarily bad. This is a higher cobra pose. This doesn't hurt my back at all right now. But a lot of people will kind of dump everything into their low back when they do this. So when you lift your knees, that really makes you engage your legs, and that forces you to take some of that pressure out of the low back. This forces you to engage your legs and core, and then you're really pressing into the hands. So it's not here. You know, you don't want the shoulders way up in the ears. You'll see some of this too. You really want to lift and press and open the collarbones. So that is upward facing dog. So downward facing dog is Adho Mukha Svanasana. Remember, Adho is downward, Mukha is face, Svana is dog. So literally named after these, you know, stretches that dogs do. Urdhva is upward. Remember, upward hands. Urdhva Hastasana. This is Urdhva Mukha Svanasana. So upward facing dog.
What's the best position for your head in up dog?
Good question. Good question. So you can see Anna here has fantastic head position because her back or her neck is long. So do we even say this? Keep the neck long. Yeah, we don't really see that. But yeah, you want to keep the back of the neck long. A lot of people will do this and they'll just crank their head back. You are not in a deeper upward facing dog if you crank your head back, right? You are just possibly hurting your cervical spine a little bit. It is okay if people want to gaze up a little bit, but really you just want to keep that back of the neck long and avoid what I call the Pez head, right? They're like, you know, you don't want to do that to your neck. You want to really lengthen it. And if you want to gaze up a little bit, that's fine. But again, we don't really teach looking up because of the Pez head tendency. A lot of times I think if people feel like they're in a deeper posture if they're cranking their head back, and that is not the case. So I've heard it said, like, you know, you could imagine that you have like a peach on the back of your neck, and so as you tip your head back, you don't want to squish the peach, that kind of thing. But a cue you could use for that is just to keep the back of the neck long, because it's really more about the upper body. It's really more about the upper and lower body, but it's really not about the neck. And people do all kinds of funky stuff with their necks during yoga practice. And sometimes I say, you know, the neck is just along for the ride. You're not going to deepen your posture with your neck. Very good question. Same thing in Cobra pose, right? That cranking the head back isn't going to help anything, right? I mean, you can look up and that'll open the throat a little bit. That's fine. It's nice to, it can be beneficial to open the throat, but not at the expense of hurting your neck. All right, you guys ready to practice? Okay, it is 12:27. I'm going to give you 20 minutes. So I want you to go through Sun A with your partner. So same thing as we did before. Teach the sequence. So you're going to start at Samastitihi right here. So imagine you just completed integration. You're going to start at Samastitihi and move into Sun A from there. So this is where your student will start. 3 rounds, do the demo after round 1. Safe place to make mistakes, so don't worry if you mess up. Breath, pose, cue, you don't have to give all the cues, pick 1 or 2. All right. It is helpful if your partner can see you. Is everybody good with going into partners right now? Is anybody not good with going into partners right now, I should ask? Okay, I'm gonna recreate our rooms so that you're with a different partner this time. All right, so I'm gonna open the rooms. It is 12:28. You'll come back at 12:48, and then we'll wrap it up. We'll do questions and wrap it up. Okay, here we go. I'll pop in and out. Feel free to ask me questions.
Just for the knees, on the knees question, I have high kneecaps and also just like knee problems. And for me, it helps to have my feet up.
Sure.
Because then it's like actually on my knees instead on my kneecaps instead of just on a weird part of my knees. So that I assume it changes per person.
Yeah,
But
I think it's fine. I think it's fine either way. I think it's fine either way. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I want to show you guys a couple things about adjustments. I really wish I had more time, but I want to make sure we get through this information, and then I will encourage you to practice integration and Sun A all week long on whoever will let you practice on them. And when you're not practicing on a person, you can do 2 things. 1, do the practice on your own and say the things out loud. Breath, pose, cue. You can do just breath, pose. You can do breath, pose, cue. But really get that like muscle memory, that neurological connection continually moving through your system. Because the more you get that down, the easier everything else will become. Say it out loud. Don't just say it in your head. There's something that happens. There's muscles in your mouth. And the more you make those shapes with your muscles, because you may feel like you know it really well in your brain. And then if you don't say it out loud, when you have to say it out loud, you'll be like, blah, 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 blah. Right? So say it out loud, even if you say it quietly. Another technique is to practice with the video. I had some students turn the video off or turn the sound off, that is, turn the video on and turn the sound off, and then say the poses with the video. So that's almost like having that visual feedback from your students. So you can watch the models in a video and say it out loud as you watch them. All right. Adjustments. Did you guys go over adjustments for child's pose? Did you do intro to assist? Did you do that ish? Okay. I have a little screen share for you. So just real quick here. Here is child's pose. I won't spend too much time. Can everybody see that? Thumbs up if you can see it. Okay. So I like this photo because she has a really awesome yoga room. But no, really I like it because she has a good stance. She's hinging from her hips, right? So she's keeping herself safe as she's adjusting. You can tell by the way she's standing that she's got to keep her core engaged to keep her spine in that alignment. Her hands are in the right place on either side of the spine, on the muscle, not on the spine itself. And her pressure is what it looks to me, what I would go for is down and then forward towards you. So there's almost always two directions of pressure in an adjustment. So that is an adjustment for downward facing dog. I've got a couple more to show you. I want you guys to try this one on yourself. So mountain pose, right? Again, you can be seated if you want, but find mountain pose in your torso and bring your hands to your ribs, right? Now kind of like slouch down a little bit. And then with your hands, you're gonna give yourself a little lift. Yeah, and so feel that. So you're kind of pressing inward and upward. It is a nice firm touch. I know you're not gonna do this with your shoulders. This is the best we can do right now though, is to do it on ourselves. So you're lifting up. This is what you're gonna do with your student. You will stand behind them, find a grounded stance so that you're almost mirroring mountain pose yourself. And then you can do this here with the hands kind of grabbing the ribs, or you can bring your hands to the sides. Just make sure you avoid the boobs, right? We don't wanna do the side boob. We want to make sure that, so, and it's okay to have your fingers rest on the ribs. It's just if your hands are up here, then you want to keep your fingers a little wider, right? So that you avoid the side boob phenomenon, which is a real thing. Okay, so that's quick. Oh, somebody had a question, sorry. Question? Question?
For that one, are we also keeping our fingers like this? I think we talked about that with child's pose, so you're moving from like...
Yeah, so that, like I said, it's okay. When you're on your, why am I echoing so much? It is okay when you are on the ribs to let your fingers rest on the ribs, right? So this is okay. So you can see how my fingers are here. The real reason for this is, one, that you want to use palm of the hands more than the fingers. It doesn't mean that your fingers can't ever touch somebody. There are times when you want your fingers, like if you're giving a shoulder massage, you need your fingers to touch. What I think we're really trying to avoid is like the creepy fingers. You don't want to adjust with your fingers, right? And in the case of like, if your hands are here, you don't want to touch the breasts. So that's my philosophy on it anyway, is that, you know, but some people, like, they get like scared to touch with their fingers. It's okay. You can, like, you know, maybe you're going to roll somebody's arms, the heads of their arms out, you know, you're going to grab with your fingers. So sometimes, yes, this is the right way to do it. Sometimes you want to be more, you know, so it depends on the adjustment really. Here in mountain pose, it's okay to let your fingers rest on the ribs. This is also okay too. So, yeah. Okay, I've got a couple other quick pictures for you. Downward facing dog, because this is a wonderful adjustment. So this is an adjustment that I love. The other, so you can almost see what she's doing here, right? She's pushing back into the hips and she's pressing up a little bit to elongate the spine. So it's almost the same action in the child's pose adjustment. It's just a very different orientation. Again, you can see her stance, very grounded. She's not going to fall over. She's not going to fall on top of her student. The other way to do this is to stand behind the student to kind of grab the thighs, like underneath the hip creases, and pull back and up a little bit. That's a more intimate adjustment. That's okay if you are comfortable with your student's comfortable being adjusted that way. This to me is a much safer introductory adjustment and really accomplishes the same thing. So, so that's an adjustment that you can try. Yeah, it's pushing back and up 2 directions. So that's an adjustment. If you have somebody you can practice hands-on assists on, you can try that. And I do have you guys for a little bit tomorrow afternoon, so if we have time, we can go over some of this stuff some more. Adjustments, again, you know, it's like 200 hours is not enough to learn all of the things ever. So it's just a continual lifestyle of learning. So here's plank, right? Now she's got a nice long, strong plank. I almost just want her to drop her hips just a tiny stosh, but she's okay here. She's safe. She's not winging her scapula. And what this teacher is doing, I would do this from behind. She's doing it from the side as she's having her student press her heels into her hand. So if you haven't had somebody do this adjustment on you, maybe you can have someone in your bubble try it on you. So you can have them squat behind you. Again, wide stance. She's pretty grounded here. You could do like a yogi squat, but make sure you're grounded so you're not going to fall over. And then put your hands back on their heels and say, push into my hands. And you'll feel your plank just totally fire up. So that's a fantastic plank position. The other thing she could do is stand to her side with a grounded stance and put her hands on her hips. So it would look something like this. All right, so if she's like a little bit up like this, you could just take your hands and gently lower down. Same thing if she's kind of like this, you could take your hands and kind of pull her back into alignment. So you can adjust from the hips that way. And that tends to be one that is easy to communicate, you know, through touch to your student. So a couple of adjustments. It's really tough to teach adjustments on Zoom when you don't have someone to demonstrate, which I don't right now. So anyway, we can go over that stuff more. I will stick around for a few minutes and answer questions. There was one more I was going to do. Oh, Cobra. You guys want to see one more? Time for just one more? Oh, where is it? Come back here. All right, I have a Cobra one to show you. There it is. This one's not a great picture, but this is the best one that I could find using the interweb. All right, I found a lot of really weird, funky Cobra adjustments. So this is a more traditional Cobra. This is not actually the Cobra that we teach. We teach a lower Cobra, but the adjustment is the same, and it's the same as an adjustment for upward facing dog. So she's standing in a very grounded stance. I'd like her to bend her knees a little bit and strengthen her core. And then the movement is kind of up and back, and you can do this one on yourself as well to some extent by putting your hands here, and then you're rolling your shoulders open and back. So this is a helpful adjustment for someone who has their shoulders way up in the ears, you know, it's rolling down and back. Now, if you have someone in your life that is comfortable receiving adjustments, it can be really helpful to just try some things out and say, how does this feel? How is this pressure? Do you want more, less, or the same? Yeah, and you'll learn more in your practice teach sessions. You'll go over more adjustments. So there's more to be learned, and it's gonna just continue to build and to sink in over time. Yeah, so it is 1 p.m. So if you need to leave at 1 p.m., you're welcome to pop out. If you have other questions for me, or there's something else you want to like learn, you know, like you want to be like, okay, I really need more information about that adjustment, feel free to stick around. Let's stick around for a minute. Okay, thank you guys so much. Oh, let's do our word. Let's do it. Should we do our word real quick? All right, let's do it. Put it in your chat. Don't hit return yet. And hit return. Awesome, brain stew. Very cool. All right. So now if you need to pop out, you can pop out. And if you need to, if you want to ask me any questions, I'll stick around.